There is a common thread that runs along myths and cultures of many belief systems, and that's the idea of God or gods intervening in the lives of mortals. Sometimes it's for spite or punishment. You see that a lot in like Greek mythologies, that kind of stuff. And other times it's a divine task or mission or message where mortals are hand-chosen for this thing. And you get the latter because gods in their great power can't be everywhere at once, and so they send mortals to do various things or task them to enforce the will of the gods. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in the mortal realms. Now, all of this lore comes with the tabletop RPG Age of Sigmar Soulbound, which is the brand new role-playing game that came out, or is coming out because it's still in pre-order, from Cubicle 7, licensed from Games Workshop. They introduced a really cool concept for groups of warriors that are all in service to the gods, and that's what we're going to talk about today. They were kind enough to give me an advanced copy digitally, and so I just want to say thank you guys so much, and you are all in for a treat because I have a ton of lore videos that I am cranking out at full speed regarding Soulbound and the greater Mortal Realms universe. So what are Soulbound, right? It's the name of the game, literally the name of the game, and then also it defines this. Put simply, these are mortal men and women of all races and creeds that have given up their normal lives to serve the burgeoning pantheon of gods across the realms. Remember, the pantheon of gods shattered during the Age of Chaos, and now kind of the events of the Realmgate Wars and up to the current timeline have been Sigmar trying to get some of these people back on his side. The big players in this pantheon are Sigmar, of course, god of heavens, Alariel, goddess of life, Grugni, the god of metal and craftsmanship, and many more that we'll be exploring in the future. The core idea is to have a force of mortals who can enforce the will of the pantheon. Rather than an army, it is a small strike team of individuals that can sneak in covertly or flank an enemy, and so on. So that's the general, thesis statement of what Soulbound exists, but let's go a little deeper. Soulbound are organized into very small groups known as bindings, which may seem like an odd title for a party or a warband, but it's what makes the Soulbound unique. When you join a binding, your essence, your soul, is worked, stretched, pulled, becoming inextricably bound to the others in your binding. You can call upon the essence and power of anyone else in that binding, and since that's the case, diversity is strength. When you play the tabletop RPG, your group, your party, is a binding. Each of you is a mighty warrior of the realms, working as a team to accomplish the will of the gods. In universe, there are innumerable bindings all across the different realms. Like, they just have different teams of people who are on standby, ready to do the will of the gods. In addition to gaining access to new abilities, you can kind of channel, abilities from other people in your binding. Those of the Soulbound gain incredible strength and stamina. You don't age any longer, but that doesn't mean much because you throw yourself into dangerous situations, you probably just die. But they become these super-powered agents of the gods, linked together with an unbreakable bond. There's one last benefit here to being Soulbound, is that when you die, Nagash does not get your soul. Instead, your soul kind of shatters. Some say forever, some say it comes back, but the grip of the god of death can never fully touch you, and that is a benefit. Now, as I was reading all this, I was thinking, okay, you get, super strength, new abilities, you never age, Nagash can't claim your soul, and I spend an eternity doing a job. Really not bad. What is the downside? Well, being Soulbound has some huge downsides, right? I cannot overstate that being useful to the gods is not the same as being loved or favored or respected by them. Some people will become Soulbound for, honor and glory and a chance to serve their deity, and others demand gold and payment, and their greed being the driving force before they'll agree to serve. These can be characters of any morality, ideology, and faith. And if you've watched the various faction lore videos on my channel, you understand there are a lot of different, value systems, built-in prejudices, long-standing feuds, and more between all these races. you get no say in who becomes a soulbound in your binding. And so you could be someone who's all of a sudden paired and teamed up with someone that you despise from a cultural and a racial point of view, not necessarily like you don't know them personally. So what initially on the surface may sound like the A-team, right? All these super good-hearted individuals with an incredible skill set can just as easily turn into a group project that we all had when we were in middle school, where everyone's kind of miserable and you all barely function together. My point is, these are not the boring, morally straight good guys. Additionally, it's dangerous to have your soul tethered to a bunch of others. Not everybody survives the process. And those that do are put through an incredibly painful ordeal. And once you're in for life. There is no retirement plan for the soulbound, which means you may be bound eternally with people you neither know nor like, but you all have a job to do. Ultimately, though, it's a super interesting idea. It's kind of like the special forces of the pantheon, right? Drawn up from all kinds of mortals and bound together, forming a unique and interesting fighting force, drawing upon the powers and skills of their binding to accomplish seemingly impossible feats. And this is what it means to be soulbound. So I'm going to transition now, and that's the core idea. I wanted to kind of get a video out there explaining what soulbound means. And now I wanted to very, very quickly just kind of go over some of the big archetypes as far as like the different factions you can play as, and kind of the pros and cons that they go through. I'm going to rapid fire through these pretty quickly because if you've seen my faction videos, you'll kind of get a much deeper understanding of some of these characters' motivations. But we're going to go ahead and go through them. So the first one, of course, is free people. Why would anyone from the free people want to be part of a soulbound? Honestly, whatever reason. This is like the blank slate for you to come up with whatever lore you want. You can choose different skills and that kind of stuff as your like free people. So you can be like a free guild fighter, or you can be a member of devoted of Sigmar. All of them will have hugely different reasons for becoming a soulbound. That one's kind of the most varied, so I'm going to kind of pass on that one because there's so much to it. I want to talk about the Daughters of Cain, though, and that idea that nobody trusts them, right? These are the fanatical berserkers dedicated to eradicating chaos. They horrify people in cities, and rumors of snake ladies and mutants are all over the place. But their prophet and leader Marathi has a few reasons for sending her daughters to become part of the soulbound. And make no mistake, she chooses this for her followers. It's not autonomy. She basically loses control of her daughters when she sends them into the service, right? She loses authority over them. So basically, what she does, because she's really clever, she sends the most ambitious and restless and combative, the people who are going to be a problem or would kind of use this as an opportunity to weed out dissidents in her rank. She calls it an honor to serve as soulbound, and it serves the secondary objective of making her look cooperative with the rest of the pantheon. But really, it's to kick out the people who might cause trouble for her. Next up are the Fire Slayers, and I was super interested to hear this one because if you don't know, the Fire Slayers are a patriarchy and religious faction, hell-bent on getting the pieces of their god Grimnir back together. And so how does that square up with giving up your life to be soulbound? The reasons a Fire Slayer might become one are many, right? Seeking redemption, maybe everyone in their lodge was lost. But doing this is a big toll on any Dwarden, right? A society so heavily based on lineage and family is a tough one to reconcile, as soulbound lose the ability to have children. In addition, while other lodges do respect soulbound and see it as an honor, they struggle to trust someone who's decided to serve another besides Grimnir. And one kind of fun note that I found here that I liked was that Fire Slayer soulbounds will often ask for some form of payment or recompense because the mercenary attitude of the Fire Slayer lodges just can't fathom doing all of this for charity. And so rather than being pariahs by working for free or, out of a sense of gratitude, they ask for some token gold or promise of wealth to be gifted in exchange. Next up are the Eidnith Deepkin. Usually their souls are being drained away, meaning even like the highest class of Deepkin, they still have this kind of void inside of them. They weren't made quite right. And this is often what puts them at odds with other forces of order, right? They are reclusive and secretive and distrustful and are all marred by this hole basically in their hearts, a symptom of their faulty design by Teclis that saw these elves constantly looking for ways to replenish the soul energy within them. When they become soulbound and link into a binding, that hunger fades to memory. They become stable and strong, and sadly, an outcast. Their personal needs are met in terms of like the souls and that kind of stuff, so they individually are doing much better, but now they have been kind of ousted from their society, which is, again, very secretive, very reclusive, and so it's just kind of this hard nature change to be able to be like, well, logically you'd say, oh, they should all become soulbound then. It's like, but it doesn't work that way, really. They kind of hate working with others. Next up are the Caradhran overlords, and they view the oath to becoming soulbound just like a lifelong contract, where their whole society is built on contracts and business deals and stuff like that. And there are some real benefits. They get an immunity to ether gold, so longer lifespans and full of conquest and glory. But at the end of the day, all they care about is the toll, right? Is this decision worth it? They're incredibly pragmatic and seeking profit. No one really respects the position of being soulbound, but they can respect what you've done with it. So if you have extended life and you've racked up more, ether gold or business for your port, your skyport, than anyone else, that is respectable, not the fact that you are soulbound. Next is the Stormcast Eternals, the personal agents that can work alongside the soulbound. Now, one interesting thing that I found was that Stormcasts can never become soulbound, nor can soulbound ever become Stormcast Eternals. There's a wealth of opinions about this position. Some treat them as heroes, others contend that if they were heroes, then they'd already be Stormcast. And so there's a lot of different opinions there. Basically, the idea is that to become a Stormcast Eternal, Sigmar has to do so much work on your soul that it then doesn't quite jive with whatever the soulbound thing has going on, and vice versa. And so basically there's just too much tinkering going on with the soul to be both Stormcast and soulbound. And lastly, I want to touch on the Sylvaneth, and they pay a terrible price for this. None of them want to be soulbound, which is an interesting thing. They're all reluctant to do it. But sometimes Alariel comes and personally asks them, and her children always say yes. If they enter a binding, their soul pod can no longer be re-sewn. And this is a huge deal if you watched my Sylvaneth series, and the memories and experiences of that Sylvaneth are lost forever. The collective spirit song is weakened like a branch cut from a tree. This is a lonely fate and a very isolated one. It's the severing of a bond that we can't quite comprehend, but they add so much to a team in terms of understanding how the realms work and where you can find safety and respite and travel quickly and lose your enemies. That they offer a lot, but they give up so much. So let's back up a little bit. We kind of got into the weeds there talking about the various factions, but why is the idea of the Soulbound so cool? Rest assured, I intend to deep dive into all the classes that this book allows, like various unit types, within each archetype we went through, and this was a very quick overview. But the real core of this video was to introduce you to the idea of Soulbound as a whole, and I really do like it. Yes, it's a way to articulate why a ragtag bunch of heroes and anti-heroes would work together, i.e., how you and your friends can make characters and play an RPG, but if this is the kind of thing that if it was revealed in a Black Library book, the idea that this pantheon has its own agents doing actions in the shadows, rather than just massive armies, I'd believe it, and I'd want to know more about it, because it's highly interesting. And even though the reasons I touched on for each faction, offering up Soulbound was brief, I love that the writers went in and made it clear. This costs you everything. This isn't an easy street to glory and power and immortality. You lose your life. You're cut off from your kin in one way or another. Most soulbound are held at a distance because Now no one can fully trust their motivations. Everything can either be seen as a scheme of the gods or not. Whether it's true, it doesn't matter. And that suspicion is only amplified when you consider that less than reputable people can become soulbound. Remember, useful and moral are two different things. And that to me was the biggest note that rang through this, right? The real day-to-day cost of being soulbound. And it's something I think really lends itself perfectly to these team-based RPG games, right? Because your character can reference experiences they've had that the rest of the party has no context for. It can be awkward and disjointed, just like 5 strangers on a mission would be. It can also be smooth going, where every fighter knows their place and their skills. But having this central starter point of all these various people, that are kind of out of their element, feeling alone because of what they've given up, being apprehensive about being on a team, I just love it. It's universal to each of them, no matter how much being soulbound is a benefit or a detriment. It gives a good starting position for all the players in your party to begin at, and the camaraderie and the teamwork can naturally start to develop from there. As you learn more about each other, your strengths and your weaknesses and your quirks and history and all that. There's so much more in this book I plan to dive into starting this week and going on to the future. And so if you want to join me with that, go ahead, click subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you get a message every single time I upload a video. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I look forward to seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much, and happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.